You're maybe 8 years old. It's a Saturday morning and your dad is driving slower than usual through a neighborhood you don't recognize. Your mom has a folded piece of paper in her lap, a printout from the internet or maybe just a handwritten address. And the car stops in front of a house. It's not a mansion. It's just a house. Vinyl siding, a 2-car garage, a backyard with enough room for a dog you haven't gotten yet. And your parents look at each other with this specific expression. The one that means something big is happening. Something is being decided. You didn't know it at the time, but what you were watching was two people in their late 20s or early 30s, probably making somewhere around $45,000 to $60,000 combined, doing something that will become almost mythologically impossible for your generation. They were buying a house, not a starter condo, not a bidding war loss, not a 15-year savings plan that still comes up short, just a house, on a Saturday morning, like it was a normal thing that normal people did. My name is Chris, and today we're going to do the one comparison nobody in the real estate industry wants you to actually sit down and run. We're going to take the house your parents bought, drop it into 2026, and show you exactly what happened between then and now. Not vibes, not generational complaining, the actual math. And by the end of this video, you're going to know the exact decade it became mathematically impossible for the average American to do what your parents did. I promise you it's not the decade you think. Let's get into it. Let's start with the number that ends arguments at family dinners. The median home price in the United States in 1985 was $84,300. In 1990, it was $122,900. In 2000, it was $165,300. In 2010, even after the housing crash, it was $221,800. Today, in 2026, the median home price in America is $420,400, according to the Census Bureau's most recent data. That's a 399% increase since 1985. Now, if wages had kept pace with that, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So let's check wages. Median household income in 1985 was about $27,700. Today, it's $83,730. That's a 202% increase. Home prices went up 399%. Incomes went up 202%. That gap, that 197-point spread, is the entire conversation. That is why you feel like you're doing everything right and still can't close. That is why your parents could do on one income what you cannot do on two. Not because they were smarter. Not because they sacrificed more. Because the ratio between what a house cost and what a person earned was fundamentally, structurally different. Here's the cleanest way to see it. In 1985, the median home cost roughly 3 times the median household income. Today, it costs just over 5 times. In high-cost metros, we're talking 10, 12, 15 times income. Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Seattle, Denver, Austin. In those markets, the ratio has completely broken from any historical precedent. But even in the national median, we've moved from 3 times to 5 times. And that doesn't sound catastrophic until you run the mortgage math. A home at 3 times your income with a 20% down payment and a 10% interest rate, which is what your parents actually faced in the mid-1980s, produced a monthly payment of about 28% of gross income. Painful but doable. That same ratio today, a home at 5 times income with a 20% down payment and a 7% interest rate, produces a monthly payment of about 35 to 38% of gross income. And that's before property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, which financial planners add another 3 to 5% on top. You are now looking at 40 to 43% of your gross income going to housing costs on a median house in a median market. The general rule of thumb for decades has been to keep housing under 28% of gross. We are now 15 points above that threshold just to buy the average American home. And if you're in a major metro, forget the rule of thumb entirely. It doesn't apply to your zip code anymore. So, the first thing people say when you show them this math is okay, but interest rates. In the 1980s, rates were 10, 12, even 18%. Today, they're 7%. Doesn't that make it easier? And this is where I need you to stay with me because this is the part that sounds right but is completely wrong. And it's the mistake that costs people years of clarity. Yes, your parents faced higher interest rates. but they also faced dramatically lower prices. The monthly payment is what actually matters, and when you run the monthly payment comparison, here is what you find. Your parents in 1985, buying the median home at $84,300, putting 10% down because 20% was also hard to scrape together on a $27,000 income, at a 12% interest rate, paid about $876 a month. Their median household income was $2,308 a month. Their housing payment was 38% of income. Rough, but they managed it. You in 2026, buying the median home at $420,400, putting 10% down, at a 7% interest rate, pay about $2,800 a month. Your median household income is $6,977 a month. Your housing payment is 40% of income. So after 40 years of economic growth, technological advancement, productivity gains, and a complete transformation of the American economy, you are paying 2 percentage points more of your income for a house than your parents did. But here is the brutal difference. Your parents' $876 payment was painful but recoverable. If something went wrong, there was margin. Your $2,800 payment leaves almost nothing. Because every other cost, health insurance, childcare, student loans, groceries, has also inflated aggressively since 1985. Your parents' mortgage was the big expense. Yours is one of 4 or 5. But the interest rate argument is actually the surface conversation. The real story, the one that actually explains why the floor fell out, has 4 chapters. And most people have never heard any of them told together. Chapter 1 is the supply collapse. In the years between 1968 and 2008, the United States built an average of 1.5 million new housing units per year. Then the financial crisis hit. Construction collapsed. Builders went bankrupt. Zoning became more restrictive. Local governments made permitting slower and more expensive. And from 2009 to 2020, annual housing starts averaged just 900,000 units. We went from building 1.5 million homes a year to building 900,000 homes a year for over a decade. Meanwhile, the population kept growing. Millennials hit peak home buying age. And the accumulated shortage from that decade of underbuilding is now estimated at somewhere between 4 and 7 million units depending on whose model you use. We didn't build the houses. And now there aren't enough of them. Basic supply and demand. When supply is constrained and demand keeps growing, prices go in one direction. You already know which direction. Chapter 2 is the financialization of single-family housing. This one makes people angry, and it should. In the early 1990s, institutional investors, meaning large private equity firms, hedge funds, and real estate investment trusts, owned a negligible share of single-family homes. We're talking well under 1%. Today, according to the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, institutional investors own somewhere between 3 and 5% of single-family rental homes nationally, and in specific markets the concentration is dramatically higher. In Atlanta, Phoenix, Charlotte, Tampa, and Dallas, institutional buyers have at various points in the last 5 years purchased 20 to 30% of homes listed in specific price ranges. And here is what makes this different from a regular buyer competing against you. An institutional buyer does not need to live in the house. They do not need a mortgage approval. They are not limited by debt-to-income ratios. They can, and routinely do, offer cash above asking price because they are not buying a home. They are buying a yield-producing asset. And when the competition for a $350,000 house includes a private equity fund with $40 billion under management, the first-time buyer with a pre-approval letter and a nervous realtor does not win that auction. Every home that gets absorbed into a rental portfolio is a home that is permanently removed from the ownership market. It can never be purchased by a family again unless the fund decides to sell. And funds don't sell when prices are going up. Chapter 3 is zoning, and this one is less dramatic but possibly the most important. In most American cities and suburbs, the majority of residential land is zoned exclusively for single-family homes. You cannot build a duplex on it. You cannot build a small apartment building. You cannot build the kind of dense, walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods that make housing affordable in most of the rest of the developed world. This is not an accident. It is policy. And it was largely put in place by homeowners who understood, whether they articulated it or not, that restricting supply protects their property values. Your parents bought into a system that was designed to make the thing they just bought more expensive over time. It worked exactly as intended. The problem is it worked so well that their children can no longer afford to enter the same system. Chapter 4 is the wealth effect feedback loop. When home prices go up, the people who already own homes get richer on paper. Their net worth increases. They feel more financially secure. They spend more. They oppose new development in their neighborhoods because new supply could theoretically compress their values. They vote for the politicians who keep zoning restrictive. And so the loop tightens. Every year of rising prices makes existing homeowners more resistant to the policies that would create affordability. Your parents are not villains in this story. They made a rational decision that was right for them and became structurally catastrophic at scale. That's different from malice. But the effect on your ability to buy a house is the same either way. Let me give you the number that makes this completely concrete. Let's meet Marcus and Diane. They're a couple in Austin, Texas. Marcus is a civil engineer making $91,000 a year. Diane is a high school teacher making $58,000 a year. Combined household income of $149,000. They are solidly upper middle class by any national measure. They've been saving for 5 years. They have $60,000 in a down payment fund. Here is their home buying math in 2026. The median home price in Austin is $485,000. A 10% down payment is $48,500. They have it. Barely. Mortgage on the remaining $436,500 at 6.9% for 30 years is $2,892 a month. Property taxes in Travis County average about 1.8% of value. That's $729 a month. Homeowners insurance, $200 a month. Maintenance reserve. Financial planners recommend 1% of home value annually. That's $404 a month. Total monthly housing cost, $4,225. Their combined net take-home after taxes and benefits is about $9,100 a month. Housing alone is 46% of their take-home pay. Before groceries, car payments, student loans, childcare, or any of the other fixed costs of being alive in 2026. After their fixed monthly costs, Marcus and Diane have approximately $800 of margin left over each month. They are a $2,000 car repair away from going backwards. These are people making $149,000 a year. They are in the top 20% of American households by income, and homeownership in their own city is functionally destroying their financial flexibility. Now let's run the same math for their parents. Dave and Carol in 1988 in Austin, Texas. Dave is also an engineer making $38,000 a year. Carol is a teacher making $24,000 a year. Combined income $62,000. The median home in Austin in 1988 was $84,000. 10% down is $8,400. Mortgage on the remaining $75,600 at 10% for 30 years is $663 a month. Property taxes at roughly 1.5%, $105 a month. Insurance, $45 a month. Maintenance, $70 a month. Total monthly housing cost, $883. Their combined take-home was approximately $4,100 a month. Housing was 21.5% of take-home pay. Dave and Carol had over $3,200 a month left after housing to build a life with. They built an emergency fund. They saved for retirement. They took the occasional vacation. They weren't rich, but they had room. Marcus and Diane make more than twice what Dave and Carol made. They are objectively better compensated in absolute dollar terms. And they have 1/4 of the financial breathing room. That is not a personal failure. That is a structural change in the ratio between housing costs and everything else. And it happened over exactly one generation. Here is the year I promised you. The year it became mathematically impossible for the median American household to buy the median American home without financial distress is 2013. That is the year the home price to income ratio crossed 4.5 times nationally, the threshold above which Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies classifies households as cost-burdened by ownership. It crossed it in 2013, and it has never come back. Not during COVID. Not during the rate hike cycle of 2022 and 2023. Not during the slowdown of late 2023. The ratio compressed slightly in 2023 when prices dipped and then immediately re-expanded when rates dropped and demand surged again. The floor never came. 2013. That is the year the math broke. Not 2020. Not 2008. 2013. The year most millennials were finishing their degrees and entering the workforce at exactly the wrong moment. Now, the government has noticed. Sort of. The Biden administration announced a first-time homebuyer tax credit of up to $10,000. The Trump administration has proposed opening federal land for housing development and pushing for zoning reform incentives tied to federal funding. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have rolled out programs allowing 3% down payments for first-time buyers. Down payment assistance programs exist in almost every state. And if you stack every available program in a favorable state, you might be able to reduce your upfront barrier by $20,000 to $30,000. That is genuinely helpful. It is also a $20,000 bandage on a $200,000 structural problem. The programs address the symptom. The supply shortage, the institutional ownership, the zoning restrictions, and the wealth effect feedback loop are the disease. And nobody in Washington has a politically viable plan to fix all four simultaneously because fixing them requires making existing homeowners' values go down. And existing homeowners vote. So what does actually work right now for real people? I'm going to give you 3 honest answers, not the ones that sound good in a podcast interview, the ones that actually move the math. Option 1 is geographic arbitrage done seriously. Not moving to a cheaper city and hoping for the best, but specifically targeting markets where the price-to-income ratio is still under 4 times. As of early 2026, those markets exist. Pittsburgh at 3.1 times. Cleveland at 2.9 times. Memphis at 3.3 times. Oklahoma City at 3.4 times. Buffalo at 3.2 times. These are not glamorous markets, but they are markets where the math still works, where a household earning $90,000 can buy a decent home and have breathing room. If your career is remote capable and your ties to a high-cost metro are preference rather than necessity, this is the highest leverage financial move available to you right now. Option 2 is the house hack. Buy a duplex or a small multifamily property. Live in one unit, rent the other. The rental income offsets your mortgage. In markets where this strategy works, it can reduce your effective housing cost by 30 to 60%. It requires more work and more tolerance for being a landlord. But it is the single most accessible wealth-building tool that still functions in the current environment for people who cannot outright afford to buy and carry a single-family home. Option 3 is the painful but honest one. If you are in a high-cost metro with no relocation flexibility and no access to multifamily, renting and aggressively investing the difference is not giving up. It is a legitimate financial strategy. A household that rents below market maximizes their 401k and Roth IRA contributions and invests the difference between renting and owning into a diversified index fund will, in many high-cost markets, build more net worth over 20 years than the household that stretched to buy and had no margin to invest. The math on this is not obvious, but it is real, and it deserves to be said without shame. Here is what I actually want you to take from this. You did not fail to buy a house because you spent too much on avocado toast. You did not fail because you lack discipline or delayed adulthood or don't want it badly enough. You are competing in a market where supply has been structurally suppressed for 15 years, where institutional capital has entered a competition you were never meant to win, where zoning policy has been actively hostile to affordability for decades, and where the wealth effect feedback loop has made every year of rising prices self-reinforcing. The math changed between your parents' generation and yours. Not a little. Fundamentally. The 3 times income ratio that made homeownership a reasonable aspiration for a working-class family in 1985 became a 5 times ratio by 2026 and a 10 to 15 times ratio in the cities where most economic opportunity actually lives. You are not behind. You are running a different race on a different course under different conditions and being graded on your parents' old scorecard. That scorecard is wrong. Not you. Run the actual numbers for your actual market. Find the ratio. Find the margin. Make the decision that the math supports, not the one that Instagram makes look inevitable. The house your parents bought on that Saturday morning was a good decision in 1985. Whether it is the right decision for you in 2026 depends entirely on numbers that have nothing to do with nostalgia and everything to do with what you can actually sustain without imploding. Do the math. Trust the math. And stop letting anyone shame you with a comparison that stopped being valid the year you graduated. If this landed, hit the like button and subscribe so I can keep making these. And drop a comment telling me what city you're in and what the price-to-income ratio looks like where you're trying to buy. I read every single one. And if your number is under 4 times, tell me that too, because I want to know where the math still works. I'll see you in the next one.